So here's the scenario. You get a new BDSM book and you open it up and you start reading the list of red flags. And then you're suddenly thinking to yourself, I'm pretty sure I'm dating a serial killer. Primal Piggy here with this BDSM United podcast. Today we'll be talking about red flags. We'll talk about vetting and uh, not just vetting like new potential play partners, but also vetting existing relationships. A lot of times we forget to do that. If we're already in a pre-existing relationship and we're attempting to add BDSM to that relationship, a lot of times we forget to do the vetting to see if, as a couple, even though you're possibly a vanilla couple or a couple in some other arrangement, friends or whatever, um, a lot of times we fail to consider, are we compatible for what we want in BDSM or what we want out of BDSM or what we're wanting to do, what role or identity we're wanting to assume within BDSM culture, and are we even compatible? Because if you both want to be the dominant and no one wants to be the submissive, and it's your choice. You may have some problems. So when you start getting involved in BDSM, you may not be compatible together. So you have to decide whether or not this culture is right for you, and only you can decide that, or you have to decide whether you want to have kink outside of this pre-existing relationship. That could look like non-monogamy, but also it could just look like topping or bottoming with nothing inherently sexual involved, with just kink involved. So, there's lots of possibilities. But back to what I was talking about at the beginning is, you read this list of red flags, and we often identify and see pieces of different ones of this list that I'll go through in a moment. We're like, I think there's something terribly wrong with this partner that I'm involved with. First, let me reassure you that red flags don't necessarily mean that you have to run the other way. They don't mean that you have to leave your existing partner because suddenly all of these red flags are somebody you've been living with for 20 years. The red flags just are things to stop for a moment and seek some clarity. Let me see what's going on. Let me find some clarity. I see an inconsistency with what you're communicating and with with who you really are. Let me uncover what that inconsistency is. Let me see if, in fact, maybe you have a rug made of human hair in your basement, filled with freezers full of body parts. Let me investigate before I decide that to let you tie me up. And so red flags are what I said. They're inconsistencies oftentimes between what somebody says about themselves or what they present on social media or what they present in the public, just their persona that they give to strangers especially. And so it's inconsistencies between that and between who you're finding who they really are, who they authentically are when you dig beneath the surface, when you learn about their possibly their religious beliefs, their political beliefs, when you're learning about their worldview, when you're learning just a lot more about them as a person and how they act. And when and then as you begin to see different actions take place, you may see inconsistencies. Somebody may tell you that they're a philanthropist and they're very generous, but if you walk by a homeless person on the side of the street and they snub their nose, and I wouldn't give that man any money, or whatever it is, it may be a slight inconsistency between who they say they are or the picture they paint about themselves and who they actually are. And when you seek clarity, it may just be that the person had been robbed by a homeless person, and so they may have some trauma that is associated and is clouding, there is causing that slight inconsistency. So we seek for clarity. We don't just go, oh, that person's a liar, I can't trust them, I need to get out of this relationship right now. And that's not the case all the time. Oftentimes on internet forums, you'll get people that will mention a red flag, and people will in the comments will be like, run, 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 run the other way, run. That's really bad advice. Seek clarity. See what's causing the inconsistency before you abandon this investment that you've made, or even if it's a slight investment. Don't just ghost people just because you see one red flag. There may be something underlying there. I will note this is we don't want to be ableists. We don't want to be prejudiced against people with disabilities, and people may be displaying what we think is a red flag. It may be neurodivergent or neurotypical brain behavior. They may be somewhere on the autistic spectrum. They may even be undiagnosed. They may have some type of mental disorder. They may have a disability. There's all different types of things, and so we don't want to necessarily be prejudiced against people unnecessarily. We want to seek clarity, and with just slight communications, we can go, oh, I see that you're not dangerous. You're just different. You're not dangerous. You're just different than me. They're different than what I thought or what I assumed, or different than the prejudice or the stereotype that I tried to fit you within. And so red flags are behavioral warning signs that something is not quite right. These behaviors are not specific to any gender, any sexual orientation, or relationship structure. And while these warning flags are apply equally to straight folk and kinky folk, you're probably going to have a statistically greater chance of finding some of these people within BDSM that are a bit more dangerous, simply because of what we do with the sadism and masochism. Predators sometimes hide more easily within BDSM culture. We try to police our own community, and we try to do our best. We try to provide opportunities. Like, I've hosted many munches, and munches are like social gatherings in the kink world. They're made in public places, and they're usually with food and sometimes with drinks, and they are safe places for people to have first meetings, and for us as a local community to help vet one another, and help people vet their potential play partners or potential life partners. And they're safe places for introductions and things like that. So we try to, even as hosts, we've had to ask people to leave. We've seen predatory behavior as a host of a munch, within somebody who's attending, and we've had to uninvite them and tell them, no, they need to leave. When we do munches, for instance, we don't give out the location, the address to just everyone. We only give it out. We don't give it out publicly. We only give it out to those who RSVP after we've done just a little bit of vetting to make sure that they are a good fit for people within our community. So we do a little bit of vetting, not very extensive, but a little bit before we even invite the person or accept the person's RSVP to the munch. So that's just something that we do. We want our munches to be safe places. We want to try to root out predators as best as we can. And then you have a personal responsibility within BDSM culture to look at the red flags and see them for what they are and seek clarity. And if you find somebody who's dangerous, to run. And if you see somebody talking with that same dangerous person, you may want to note, hey, I checked them and I found some inconsistencies. Make sure you vet them well too. Maybe they weren't a good fit for you. Maybe they're a better fit for someone else. We don't exactly know, what someone else is looking for. And so if they are very, if you do play with somebody and they assault you, for instance, or they break your limits and you see them RSVP to an event, it's a good idea to contact the host and tell them, I've played with that person and they don't play safely. I've played with that person and they violate limits. They don't follow negotiations, or they did something that was rapey, or something that was assault, and let people that are in those positions know, so that we can somewhat blacklist those people and try to keep them away from those within our community, because we care about our BDSM community, and so we try to police ourselves as best as we can. And so so what if you have uh become involved with somebody and you start reading these red flags and you're like, wow, I think this person may be dangerous. Well, you don't play with them. you you end the relationship. You don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't owe anyone, you just don't owe anyone anything. You can ghost them. You can cancel them. You can say, look, I just don't want anything more to do with you. It's over. I don't want any more communication. Don't You can block them on social media, or you can do what you need to do. If they're dangerous, just don't uh, don't let them be a part of your life, or a potential for playing. It's very serious in our culture. Our culture is very takes these matters very seriously. We take the issue of predators very seriously, because you can put yourself in situations that are fatal. The things we do are risky, and as I said in a previous podcast, some of these things can be considered criminal. It's impossible, or not impossible, but it's not legal for in some places to give consent to S&M impact play. And so if you do impact play, you're risking, if you decide to, you may be risking legal allegations that could be brought against you if the person decided that they didn't, after the fact, that they didn't like the scene, and they could charge you with something. They could go to the police and have you charged with assault. And so, these are risks. So we want to make sure we're playing with someone who is safe, someone who's sane, and someone who understands what consensual is about. And so, I don't want to make it I want to get to the list. I don't want to belabor the point too much. I do want to share one scenario, though. So, just a couple Christmases ago, a young man hooked up on a dating site called Grinder. This is a homosexual dating site. It's kind of like a Tinder, in where it is notorious for people hooking up mainly for sex, sometimes for kink. Just generally, it's a not looking for long-term relationships, but looking for short-term relations. And so a man, they were talking, and for whatever reason, um, the person they met, and when they met, they didn't follow any really good protocol. They didn't have like a safe call, or they didn't have they didn't tell anyone exactly where they were meeting, and those types of things. It was a little bit hush hush or whatnot, and uh, the young man went missing. He met somebody on Grinder, and he went missing for several days, and they couldn't find him. He just his phone didn't work, and they just couldn't contact him. It went straight to voicemail, and then they just realized that the voicemail box was full, and they thought the worst. Something was wrong. They knew something was wrong. They reported him missing, and ultimately, like I said, it was right around Christmas time. The man was found dangling, hanging, tied up by his wrists in another man's basement, dead. And the person had mutilated his genitals and possibly even cannibalized him to some extent. And so, we take these things very seriously. We want to be we don't want to just hook up with random people. We don't want to play too fast. We don't want to meet in under unsafe and secretive circumstances. We want to, take things a little bit slow because we don't want to end up dead. I don't want to shame the victim in that because it's when you're facing somebody who's a predator, we just want to do our best to try to figure it out. But I just wanted to use his story to just to help show, not to shame him as a victim and say he didn't vet correctly or he ignored any red flags. I don't want to say that because I don't know whether that's the case or not, but we do just want to show the seriousness of what's involved. Of you can end up dead, you can end up hanging and mutilated and cannibalized and all kinds of different things. You can show up thinking that one person is going to be there and there's 5 people there to rape you. And you can, there's just lots of different possibilities of how things can go terribly wrong within the BDSM community. So we definitely want to do our due diligence to look for these red flags. We want to look for them we're talking about potential play partners, but we also want to look for these within our pre-existing relationships. We want to see if we are compatible to engage in BDSM, because we can be in a vanilla relationship for many years, but if you add BDSM play, you're adding a different element. You're adding a lot of different elements. You're adding maybe power exchange. You may be adding, things like impact and kink and rough play and primal, and there's all these different kinds of elements. We want, maybe somebody isn't going to be good with safety. That they're a great husband, but they're not great with safety, or they're a great wife, but they're not great with safety, and so their personality just doesn't quite fit. So we definitely want to look. Uh, let's see. Some of the different ones are red flags. Here's a group of them, and it's under the heading they try to isolate you. It's a red flag if they try to limit your access to others in your life, your friends, your family, and the BDSM community. If they have a grudge against their local BDSM community, it's a possible red flag. Why do you have a grudge? Why do you feel these people all wronged you? Is it legitimate, or did you do something dangerous and they held you accountable for it? Just something to ask, to seek clarity, no judgment, just clarity. Forbids contact with others or undermines relationships or activities, is negative and unsupportive of your other established relationships. If you're polyamorous and they start to try to come in and hijack your relationship, if they try to steal you away, that can be a problem. Monitors your communications, your emails, your phone calls, your chats. May want you to quit your job or give up your car or your telephone, or wants to control your finances. In an established MS relationship, some of these things may take place. They take place after a long period of consideration, a long time of negotiation, a long relationship. Some of these things, it's not that may take place, but out of wanting their devotion, wanting you to give them your devotion, not necessarily isolate you just to be anything destructive in your life. Habitually calls and or visits unexpectedly, refuses to allow you a safe call, becomes angry if you question them or show signs of independence or strength. You don't submit to anyone right away. You don't seek to dominate someone right away. That's not how BDSM works. You have to earn someone's trust, and you earn it, and then you enter into, once you have negotiations and a contract, whether formal or verbal, you enter into a dynamic of submission and or dominance. And so perhaps so it's a red flag if they're deceptive. And here's some of those types of ways. Is reluctant to give you personal or factual information about themselves. That's a really big one. There's a lot of people that use BDSM as a means to try to cheat on others or other relationships that they have. And so if they don't want you to, if you can only call them between the hours of 1 and 2 in the morning, that's definitely a red flag. If you can't text them at any time, no, they may not answer your text, but if you can't just send them a text at any time because they're afraid, that's usually because they're afraid somebody's going to read that text. And a lot of times they go, oh, I don't want my kids to find out. And they'll use these different deceptive ways. No, you don't want your spouse to find out. That's usually the way it goes. Refuses to give their marital status when asked before a first meeting. Gives inconsistent or conflicting information or details about themselves or past events. Maybe somebody's, trying to inflate who they are. Maybe they'll tell you that they've been involved in BDSM for 20 years, but then they can't give you any references. You got to played with somebody in 20 years. Somebody's got to know. You got to have attended one event in 20 years. My goodness, just something. You got to have something, something to show for that 20 years, that supposed 20 years. Oftentimes 20 years is just like this, thing that someone makes up. They grade themselves on a curve and inflate, the 4 years that they've been involved into 20. Has very limited times, places, methods where you're able to contact them, and gets angry if you try to make contact outside of those conditions. That's a big red flag. Does not give you their home or work phone numbers at the appropriate time. You don't give out your phone number to somebody that before a first meeting. If you're not sure about somebody, you don't give them access to contact you. You want to only give them you don't want to give them unrestricted access to contact you. It's very inconvenient to have to change your phone number. It's very inconvenient to have to change your email address that you've used for a long time. It's more convenient to give them a kick or something that's more anonymous, but still, or maybe it's convenient. It's more convenient. There's features where you can block them on Facebook, for instance, or Snapchat, or whatever you're on. You can block them on Insta. But but changing your telephone number can be very difficult. Changing your physical street address is going to be next to impossible. You're not going to want to have to get up out and move out of your home into another home to get away from a dangerous stalker. So you're not going to want to give somebody your home phone number or your cell phone number or your home address before a first meeting. That's just insane. You want to find out that the person's safe and they're not creepy and they're not, so just don't do it. But at the appropriate time, when you've been playing together for a while or been dating for a while, it's that's when, giving your home phone number is probably a good idea. And if they're not willing to do it, they may be afraid. You're going to need to seek clarity. Who are you afraid of answering the telephone? Because if it's your kid, I can say I'm just a friend. But if it's your wife, they're going to be really upset, and I'm going to be upset that you have a wife and you didn't tell me, something like that. So has multiple online identities for interacting within the same communities. That's kind of, a red flag. Why did they have to create so many? And so do they get put in Facebook jail a lot because they don't know how to have have self-control and work within the limits or the boundaries set by the community that they're involved in. So if you're involved in Facebook, but you push the limits beyond the community standards, and you keep getting dinged for it and put in Facebook jail, for instance, I know it's difficult, but if that person is a submissive and they're pushing the boundaries, it may or a potential submissive, it may tell me something about their ability to, will they push my boundaries? Will they violate my limits? They're violating these community standards. If they always drive over the speed limit and never within the bounds of the system that they live within or choose to drive within, if they're always pushing those boundaries, how do I know that they won't push my boundaries? How do I know that they won't break my limits if they'll break a speeding limit? Just things to consider, things that you need clarity on. You know, maybe they're just a bad driver. We don't want to necessarily hold that against them. Cheats on you. It's a big red flag. Gives the impression of being very successful without any evidence of real success. Disappears from communication for days or weeks at a time without explanation. Your phones don't just die and then you know, come back to working. Phone plans don't just get cut off unexpectedly all the time, you know, and people don't just, oh, I had to spend, weeks in the hospital just, but I couldn't call you to tell you because I didn't care enough or whatever. And people aren't regularly getting put in comas, not generally. So if it seems too good to be true, oftentimes it is, especially when you're first meeting or you're seeing a potential for somebody. That's maybe drama that you just don't want in your life. There's nothing against them. You just don't necessarily need that drama in your life, perhaps. And so, is evasive about their activities, especially unexplained absences. Primarily interacts with you in a kinky or sexual manner, as if role playing. If they just, if you're asking them about their childhood or something like that, you don't want it, you don't want them to be flirting with you. You want just serious, hey, I'm just trying to hear about your childhood. Just get a sense for who you are on your serious side, you know. Or if you're never serious and you're always joking, what are you, to me, what are you, what are you insecure about that you always have to be joking and can't be serious? And so we'll not have normal, everyday, vanilla conversations. It's okay for your relationship to revolve almost exclusively around kink, because that's what our culture is. It's not okay for them to not be able to, talk about anything, just to have any small talk at all. And so you're not just there as a hookup, you know. Nobody wants to, or people generally don't just want to be the hookup, and so they don't want to necessarily be objectified like that. They want to be personified. They want to have a person, about them, especially at the beginning. Maybe down the road, that may be a kink that you're involved in, but not all, not right at the beginning. Not when you want somebody to get to know you and be able to connect. You want to be able to make some kind of connection with them. Your friends they behave oddly. Your friends warn you against that person. They're critical of the public BDSM community, and they won't participate in munches or parties or clubs. Uh, they're critical of many respected members of the BDSM community, and they have interpersonal conflicts with other BDSMers. Um, they have no apparent BDSM references or friends that you can talk to, and they become angry or change the topic, or they answer questions with questions, or they end the conversation when you ask personal questions or about BDSM or ask for references. May give you made up names of friends, but you can't verify that they even exist. Has bad or no relationships with their biological family. Not always a terrible thing. A lot of people's biological families won't have things to do with them because they're involved in kink or they're part of the LGBTQ community or any other number of things. Some people, even if they just have tattoos, their family doesn't want anything to do with them. Family can be petty oftentimes. And so it's not, like I said, it's not a run, but it's just like, let me seek clarity. Like, why, what is it about your family? You know, if you're wanting to be anything more, then, who am I going to have to interact with? Who am I going to have to watch for in the grocery store if I'm your boyfriend or girlfriend or you're submissive or you're dominant? And so seems insecure. They often exaggerate. They deflect or blame others for things going wrong and resorts to extreme measures to prove that they themselves are not at fault. They don't take personal responsibility when things go badly, and they won't acknowledge their own mistakes. I mean, this is quite a long list. And so I can go through a lot of these different ones, but we're coming up on the end on a 30-minute mark here. And so I'll just mention just a couple. You don't want somebody who's disrespectful. That could be a red flag. They don't respect your feelings, your rights, or your opinions. They're rude to people when you're out, such as waitresses or cashiers or janitors, and they display little concern or awareness for the feelings or needs of others. They don't seem to say thank you or excuse me or I'm sorry to anyone. Um, they are manipulative. They try to make you feel guilty for not being good enough or smart enough or pretty enough or any of those kinds of things. They say that you're not a true submissive or a true slave or a true dom. They belittle your ideas. They blame you for their own hurt feelings and anger outbursts, and they blame you for their relationship problems. Or they yell or they threaten to withdraw their love or leave you if you don't do as they wish. They're inconsistent. They don't keep their word. They break promises. They make plans with you and then they make excuses for changing those plans. They treat you lovingly and respectfully one day and then harsh the next. They go through extreme highs, behaving with great kindness, and then pronounced lows, behaving with cruelty. Maybe they're domineering, and you may see some of these if you're looking for somebody who's a dominant, but you can be a dominant and be assertive, but you don't necessarily want somebody who's domineering, someone who pressures you into doing things you don't want to do, who doesn't respect your limits, your negotiations, your contracts, pushes you too quickly into a DM or an MS or a polyamorous or non monogamous relationship, pushes you into a sexual relationship too fast, pushes you to look for a third or a unicorn, overly demanding of your time, must be the center of your attention, insists that safe words or safe calls are not necessary, and they can't give you a logical reason why, but it's just their opinion. Um, or won't tell you what they will use to replace those things if they don't want those things. Um, is intemperate. They spend money largely and inappropriate on luxury items. They abuse alcohol or drugs, gamble excessively, constantly ask for money or material goods from you and others. They fall in love with you way too fast. They swear their undying love before they even meet you. They they begin saying things like "I can't live without you," or "Do what you want with me," or "I don't have any limits," or "I'm willing to try everything once." That's a really big one. Really, anything? Yeah, you may want to. You may not have done your homework on what limits are, and so you definitely want some. That's definitely a red flag where you want to seek clarity and maybe educate them a bit. Deliberately says or does things that result in getting themselves hurt. Maybe they're temperamental, and I'm getting here towards the end here, so not too many. Maybe they're temperamental. They lose control of their emotions and arguments. They raise their voice. They yell. They call you names. They use force or violence to solve problems. They punch walls or throw things when they're upset. They turn on their peers, quickly going from a best friend to an arch enemy, often for trivial or imagined reasons. They speak badly of others, particularly of people with whom they were once good friends. They display a disproportionate negative reaction to being told no. Um, they hold excessive grudges against people. They threaten suicide or other forms of self harm. They're hypersensitive and easily upset by annoyances that are a part of everyday life. Maybe they have certain established behaviors that are red flags. They themselves were victims of abuse. Their abuse may be a learned behavior, and it may be a behavior that that they may fall back, they may fall into themselves, uh, given, the given too much stress or anxiety put on them. They may exhibit cruel behavior towards animals. They might admit to hitting a partner in the past, but claims that the partner made them do it. They may be hit in an abusive, harmful way, not hit in a BDSM impact play, pleasure play kind of way. And so it was quite a list. There was a lot of different traits on there. Maybe within your vanilla relationship that you've had, if you're looking at this list from a pre existing relationship, maybe, some of these things hitting the walls or something like that may have been, may have, maybe your partner may have done that when they were angry in the past. And, these are things that, if they hit walls like that, possibly you may not, you know, feel comfortable tied up with them with a paddle in their hand. These are considerations that you definitely need to make for yourself. So you definitely want to look for red flags even within pre-existing relationships. And you just want to look for these red flags. You can, rewind this podcast and listen again. You can find lists of red flags all throughout Google, BDSM red flags. I made a previous podcast and video about this as well, where I talked about a lot of these different things. It's definitely a subject that we cannot talk about enough because, our our lives are precious and they hang in the balance a lot of times. We want to be aware of all the risks involved, and we want to be aware of the risks that people may pose. And so we want to try to mitigate the amount of risk we're putting ourselves in when we're already doing risky behaviors like S&M or bondage and discipline. If we're allowing someone access to our psyche or to us psychologically to train us to be a slave or to be a submissive to them, then we want to know that we're going to be cared for and we're going to be shaped and molded into someone who is into a positive DS or MS relationship, one that's positive for us, and not just be manipulated and not just be abused or mentally abused or taken advantage of. We may want to be somebody's sex slave, for instance, but we don't want to, we may not want to just be that. We may want them to actually care for us too. We may not just want to be used indiscriminately at any given time, all the time, and just be used like a piece of meat all the time. That may not be our thing. And so we definitely need to play with the right partners, the partners that are right for us. And we need to, if we see these red flag behaviors, just realize that it's not our responsibility. We're not professionals. It's not our responsibility to cure someone or change someone, but it's our responsibility as not to play with someone. So we don't play with someone who has really bad red flags and can't account for inconsistencies and can't give a necessary clarity. We just don't play with those people. We don't do BDSM with them. And if we're in a relationship with them, we still continue to be, may continue to be with a vanilla partner of them, but we just don't bring BDSM into the mix with them because it's not going to necessarily turn out well or turn out as we hope that it would in that situation. I'm Primal Piggy. You can find me on Facebook at The Primal Piggy. You can also find the website that I'm a part of, the BDSM education site called Whips, Chains, and Duct Tape. You can find them on Facebook at the letters WCDTBDSM. All those letters together stands for Whips, Chains, Duct Tape. The first letter of each one of those in BDSM. Altogether, WCDTBDSM on Facebook. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Continue to subscribe to them and continue to listen. You may want to go back and scroll back and listen if you've listened this long. You may want to listen to some of the past episodes. I think we have about 23 or 24 at this point. So go back and listen to some in the archives. I think that you'll enjoy some of them. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.